emails. Emails.
And then let's start. Bruno, it's good to see you again. How are you doing?
Good, and thanks for inviting me, Christian. Very happy to be there with you and the people in the audience.
I'm happy to have you here. Bruno, let's talk a little bit about venture capital and innovation. When I entered the life science industry in 2006, I heard the first time the term. First reaction was, what is that? Can you give a little bit of an explanation what venture capital is, and since when are you in this industry?
Sure. So venture capital, I mean, people date it back to the 70s and some others even earlier than that. Basically, it is a way, and I would call it an institutional way, because it's going through the creation of funds and investment of the money from those funds to support innovation. And venture capital is more about, I would say, early stage innovation, R&D type companies in different sectors. You have different type of venture capital funds. I would say that the two main ones are the classic close-ended venture capital funds, where you have, once you raised money, a period of 5 years to complete your investments and build your portfolio of companies. And then this is followed by another 5 years that give you time to pursue the divestments and return the money to the investors with, obviously, this is the end goal, a very good return on investment. Sometimes those funds can be prolonged by 1 or 2 additional years if need be. And the other, I would say, classic type of funds that we see a lot and increasingly for the last years in our business are the corporate venture funds. So similar approach, supporting innovation, R&D type companies, so largely unprofitable companies, but this time via a vehicle that has been created by a corporate from a given sector. So obviously we're in life sciences at Seroba, so we're thinking about pharmaceutical and medical devices corporations that create this venture fund, internal venture funds, where they allocate money. And this is more open-ended. I mean, we can call them as well evergreen. And they have obviously more time in the horizon to do various investments and consider an exit out of them. And so as far as I'm concerned, I've been doing that now for about 20 years. Believe it or not, time flies. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is true. Time flies, especially in the last 10 years. I guess innovation really took off, and with all the changes coming to the world, life is getting more and more excited. To keep up to you, I also did a little bit of research before our recording in venture capital. And what you said that venture capital started in the 70s. I didn't know that. I always thought it's a little bit older. But it seems that the first investments were in companies like Apple, Microsoft, Genentech. I think also Gilead took up some venture capital. And it didn't really look very exciting to me when I was a student at the university. I thought just, okay, it's another investor putting money into a company. So where is the difference here? And during the research, I found then also that in 1995, the term disruptive technology and disruptive innovation was coined by an author from the Harvard Business School. And I asked myself the question, why is it really necessary for innovation to have venture capital on the field? Aren't there enough investment models already on the market?
So I would say that it all depends about how you define innovation. I mean, in our businesses, meaning finding new drugs and new medical devices, this is a quite long, complex process, and it costs a lot. It is very capital intensive. And it is this capital intensity that necessitates large sources of funding, and an obvious one is venture capital. So it doesn't mean that innovation is only supported by venture capital. I mean, you can find innovation in different areas and different forms, but what we're doing and what colleagues that are not in the life sciences sector, but tech sector are doing can be very capital intensive. And so this is where the venture capital play a key role in financing this type of innovation.
When we talk about capital intensive, can you give a bit of an outlook what that means? Are we talking about a few thousand euros, or are we going a little bit higher?
No, I would say it's tens of millions of euros, if not hundreds of millions of euros. But one needs to consider the time window for an investment from a VC fund, because something which is not necessarily obvious to people which are not into this field is the fact that we are not going to wait for this new drug candidate or new medical device to be necessarily on the market and for a company to become profitable before we exit. And so the time frame where we support this company is from company creation to, let's say, some kind of clinical stage, early, mid, or even late stage now, depending on the area. And this is where you have a given amount of money. I mean, it's difficult to say ballpark how much, because obviously from one treatment modality and one sector, it might differ. But I would say that generally companies would need to raise, let's say, anywhere between 50 and 100 or more before you can come to what we call an exit, which is either the acquisition of the startup we invested in, either an IPO. And this money actually can sometimes not come only from VC funds. It can be complemented with partnerships with corporates, whereby there is a licensing deal and the corporates will provide what we call upfront money and then milestone payments in exchange of some rights to a technology or to a program. And this is very well seen by the startups as much as we as investors, because we call this non-dilutive money. It's cash coming into the bank of the company and not cash in exchange of shares, which would dilute the shareholders. You see, on top of the validation, and as well tapping into the expertise of those large corporations that can be very helpful to be sometimes more cognizant and efficient in pursuing the technology and the programs.
When you think about survival of technology, I mean, looking at the value chain. So, for example, in life science, we have the universities and research organizations. To put it really bluntly, I know there's more on the field, but let's just stay with that, who invest in innovation, basically initially, and they produce publications and patents.
Yes.
And on the other hand of the value chain, we have the big corporations like Pfizer, for example, who gained some fame with the latest development in mRNA vaccines. Also Moderna would say, meanwhile, they also would consider them rather big, Gilead, Roche, and all the big names. The question that I have to you is, and I would like to hear your opinion on that, why don't big corporations not go directly to research organizations and just license everything out of the university into the organization and bring that up to speed into the market?
So actually they do perform a lot of scouting, and we investors come across them as much as our startups, actually, either at conferences or either on the field, meeting sometimes the same people and the same incubators, accelerators, or research organizations. But I think that one cannot do it all. Okay, and it's all about dedication and focus. And those large corporations have, I would say, big stakes, which is always to look at the bottom line and try to fill the pipeline, maybe on a short and mid-term basis. And those research collaborations with universities usually are very, very early stage. So they do clearly sign some of those, but I mean, it's not necessarily their bread and butter. It's not their focus. And as well, they need to be very picky in focusing on the right programs or approach that they really need to complement what they have internally. Opposite to that, you've got a startup backed by venture capital funds, which life and death will depend upon a given technology or maybe one or two programs that might come from those university and research centers. And so it will be obviously a different way of proceeding in terms of attention and execution as well. And I think this is why probably, one would have to check the data, but why I think it's a lot of startups backed by VCs that usually come out of this research and are the best to value this innovation up to a point where then the large corporation will be probably more comfortable and more savvy as well to take them on board and bring them to the next step. So you see, it's always horses for courses. Upon the lifetime of a project, you need dedicated people to be able to dig in and find the nuggets, if you want. Sometimes you really need to polish hard to see the gold, because this is one of the issue. It's sometimes hard for the tech transfer office to really be able to fully value what the labs have and to be able to, in a way, sell a good story to the outside world to attract people to invest into those research programs. And so, yeah, you need this dedication, and then it's about execution capabilities. And the level of risk obviously is higher at a very early stage. And so you need the right people who have the guts and the strong heart to go with something which is super new, really what we call cutting edge, where probably no one really explored that, and have the guts to say, okay, let's put a few millions to not only confirm the data that we know, but then to take it to the next steps and make something really good out of it. And we always need to keep as well the fact that it's not all about the money, all about a project. In life sciences, at the end of the day, we're talking about patients. And even if many of us, among us investors, don't see the patients, okay, because we're not coming necessarily all from a medical background, nor are we going to visit patients to better know some pathologies, but we have that in mind. I mean, if you succeed, you will be able not only to improve the quality of life, but put it plainly, to save lives. And I think this is as well a clear dedication in a startup. So the focus is very intense, and many employees and people have that in mind. Sometimes you will find even founders that are deeply related to the cause because they or some family members suffers or have suffered or even died of a given pathology that they want to tackle. And this is really a different ambition and motive to make things succeed.
I completely agree to what you say. I think the amazing thing in the pharma or life science industry is that the customer at the end of the day is not only someone who buys a product like in other industries, but the technologies really have an impact to, as you said, in the best case, to help patients survive and or increase the quality of their lives. And this is a great thing. But part of this game always is capital. As you said, it takes sometimes a few 100 million, if not billion, billion, to bring a product to the market. I read the statistics lately that said that meanwhile, to bring a new therapy to the market, it takes about $3 to $4 billion. So it's something that I think no founder can bring up themselves except.
Alors, it's true, but one has to look into this because, I mean, let's face it, there's a bit of politics involved here with such big numbers that are always inflated and ever increasing. I came across this kind of stats for, well, actually, since I started this business and even before, to realize quickly that very often you have the cost of failure included in it. Because, I mean, let's just for illustration, because this is not the real data. And again, the data is very diverse depending on the therapeutic area, indication you're going to go after. But let's say you have one project out of 100 that will make it to market, you see. And so you've got to take into account all the efforts and money invested into the 99 others that unfortunately fail at some point, but help you as well to get this one across the finish line. Okay, so it might not be 1%, of course, but it's just for illustration. So this is why there is a big number. But clearly it's very costly. I mean, I mentioned the fact that as a VC, we think that companies have to raise 50, 100 or more before becoming, I would say, a good target for acquisition or IPO. But it's true that when you think about all the efforts and money dedicated since the lab time at university up to market approval and beyond, because you've got all the commercial efforts as well, yes, it is in the hundreds and hundreds of millions, and in some cases even billions.
You mentioned an interesting term, failure.
Yeah.
I think nobody plans to fail initially, so everybody wants to be successful as a startup, as a starting company. But failure happens. I mean, what is your opinion? Why some things don't hit the market?
Alors, there are various reasons. I would say that the best reason, and you will understand why I say the best reason, is when, after trying to really understand the biology and making a bet that your new drug or new devices will address a given pathway or target or mechanism of action, that you really believe into it, well, actually, biology will bring some new features to this original hypothesis. And you will figure out over time that actually not all patients obviously are the same, will react the same. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, if the investment hypothesis around biology is not proven, well, so be it. But the important thing is that at the origin, your investment thesis was sound, backed by experts, key opinion leaders that really believed into it, but the proof is in the pudding. I mean, we're talking about innovation. So it's not that you can look back and say, oh, it worked before, so I know that you have all chances that it will work again. Well, actually, no, you don't know, clearly, unless you are into some incremental innovation to make some things a bit better. But no, we're talking real innovation here, okay? Something that will dramatically change the way patients are being treated or even diagnosed and monitored. And so this is, I would say, one main reason, and I would qualify it as the best reason, failure, okay? Then you have other reasons. Other reasons can be competition. I mean, to put it simply, today, given the amount of money and new company creations and new ideas generated every day, as soon as you invest into a company, the next day you have competition emerging. Of course, I'm pushing it a bit, but just to say how competitive it became. And it's great at the end of the day, because you cannot rest on your laurels, you know, and just have a nice cup of tea every 2 hours and think that, okay, you have time. No, you need to really be focused and up to speed on the program you want to pursue. And so sometimes competition can come up with something that is better. And so you need to reinvent yourself, maybe restart. And this is where partly failures can happen. And then the worst of the failures is about bad execution. Okay, let's face it. And bad executions means, unfortunately, a management team which is not up to speed with regard to how to best position a technology or program, not up to speed into the best study design to really prove their case. And sometimes it can come as well from governance, okay? And it's partly execution as well. And when I mean governance, it's that you've got board of directors with very different people there. And sometimes the agendas are not aligned, the vision are not aligned either. And it creates sometimes confusion, lack of decision making, and you can suffer a lot from that as well. So you see, you have a variety of failures, and this is where, but probably we'll speak about that maybe later on, but this is where experience is fundamental, because experience means avoiding mistakes that you've seen and experienced before, but as well making sure that you've got the right mindset around the table with people that can work together, with whom there is alchemy, because there are going to be inevitably tough times to go through, and we will need to collectively think in the best manner, without throwing dirt at each other and without wanting to be absolutely right compared to others, but really raise the right questions, bring the right expertise, open the book of relationship that we have to help, and to go through those tough moments. And so the human aspects of it, for me, is actually critical. Sometimes even more critical than the science and the data, you see. And I have this say where you can get it wrong, and it's going to be like inverse alchemy. You have gold in the wrong hands and you turn that into lead. So you need to be super careful about the human aspects in any venture at any stage of the development of a company.
That's absolutely true. I heard once another saying. They said an A team with a B technology will always win, and a B team with an A technology has a high chance of failing, just because of the human factor, as you mentioned. So you mentioned expertise and mindset, two building blocks that venture capital can help with. When I look on the political scale, when we talk about Europe, for example, I very often hear from several politicians that Europe should become the startup continent, or several countries state our country is right for startups. How can venture capital help on this mission?
So yeah, it's true that we're hearing about Startup Nation, and it's a very nice buzzword that a lot of politicians like, because it make them look modern, and it's always people, thinking about the same and tapping themselves in the back and throwing medals at each other and good words. Well, that's nice. I mean, at the end of the day, it's needed somehow, but I'm a kind of more down to earth and a humble person, and I need to think hard, and it's like a doctor actually, to address a situation and a disorder. You need to get the right diagnosis, because otherwise you're going to miss the treatment, if there is a treatment. And here, I mean, we need to see how critical innovation and startup is in our economy, and how to help on that. So, I mean, if we look back at this COVID crisis, it's something interesting. I mean, people realize that, hey, entire industries are not there anymore in Europe or even in the States. I mean, we let them go to emerging countries. And actually, it has been a trend for decades, where we thought, let's focus more on competitive industries with highly qualified jobs, high margins, and high barrier to entry. Because this is where the future lies, and let go I would call that the classic old-fashioned industries, because of lack of competitiveness, labor costs, which would be too high compared to emerging countries. Well, fair enough, but I think we've seen the limit of that with the COVID-19 crisis, clearly. And so when I say that we need to be humble, it's true that innovation is super important, and I'm going to come back to that. But let's not forget that outside of innovation, the real world is composed of many different industries, which are key in their societal aspects, and making sure that our countries can stand up. But so now let's focus back on innovation. So behind the Startup Nation buzzword, what does it mean? It's true that it's a highly competitive world out there, okay? And actually the large corporations, and some of them in the past, which were the leaders, just faded away, sometimes disappeared, because they were just too lenient with a very nice market share, some nice cows they could milk, and they thought they could milk it forever. And all of a sudden, innovation came up and totally changed the picture in terms of business model, in terms of products, solutions, and they lost it. Okay, and this is where innovation becomes critical, because you don't want to have a country or even a continent or a political organization like the European Union to miss on innovation and clearly not be able to have in Europe maybe an Amazon, a Google, or Facebook, or LinkedIn. Okay, and similarly, I could talk about many large pharma or large device companies that are now more in the US than in Europe, and even our old pharma and device industries have been consolidating, and sometimes in Europe, the R&D research centers are not even more in Europe. It is on the East Coast, on the West Coast of the US. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's something fundamental that needs to be tackled, which is how to not only keep innovation here in Europe, but how to nurture it to make sure that tomorrow's leaders are now emerging thanks to this support. And it can be financial support, but there is more support than finance, obviously. Okay, and this is where venture capital again play a key role in it. So we are clearly keen in every country in Europe to raise what is at stake, meaning this ecosystem of startups, and actually we're facing an issue, I think, which is not the lack of good science. Okay, and good scientists. We've got great science and great ideas, but it is still, I think, what might be missing is two things: is enough people able to value that innovation properly and put that on track. Okay, and then and we have in part trying to answer this right now in a few countries in Europe, how to make sure that those companies are not dried out of cash too early and getting acquired by foreign countries, and therefore not being in Europe anymore as the future European leaders. And this is where what we call late stage VC financing / growth capital comes in the picture. But again, it's not all about the money, but surely it will help keeping those emerging companies in Europe, growing them, and they can go globally, but still being headquarters in Europe in different fields, including the life sciences field.
Interesting parts that you were mentioning here. It reminded me of the 90s of Europe when I was at the university. And back then, I mean, the world in Europe was extremely great because the automotive industry was winning globally. Just think about the German trademarks, Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, also the mobile industry. It was with this dot-com bubble, I think the mobile industry, the European mobile industry conquered the world, practically speaking. And then in 2006, a nerd in the United States, Steve Jobs, reinvented the entire mobile industry. So this is what you mentioned, disrupting innovation, and why it's important to have startups here in Europe. For me, still the best story that exemplifies how a single company can wipe out an entire industry in a continent if the continent does not innovate. And this is mobile industry. iPhone, the best example. Now I think everybody has an iPhone or Samsung phone, which comes from Asia, here in Europe, and the old trademarks like Nokia, Ericsson, Siemens, that were there until the first, I would say, mid of the first decade of the century, are gone. Yes. They're not there anymore.
And it creates even geopolitical issues. I mean, do you want your country to be dependent on data being stored into another country? Okay, data about your citizens or the customers of the companies of your country. Do you want your citizens to be dependent upon drugs and devices which are largely produced outside of your country? I mean, there are key questions that one needs to face and answer clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you mentioned data, I think most of the data is most likely stored in the United States, so or by US companies, because in Europe we don't have that. The question that pops up in my mind while we are speaking is, I mean, it's clear we need venture capital to move innovation forward. You mentioned this mindset thing, and to me, is what's missing on university is this entrepreneurship mindset, and it needs a very specialized type of personality who, on one hand, understands the industry and the structure they need to build an innovation towards to, but on the other hand, also needs to understand the creativity at the universities and must have the talent to unite these both mindsets.
It's a tough job, but I think it's like any two worlds that has to do business together in the value chain. It's first about communication, and I must say that I've seen the bads and the goods, and actually the better over the years, where those different parties better communicate. Okay, so obviously not in all institutions, and it's not good in all institutions, but everyone is trying to work hard to get to that level. I mean, the issue is that it becomes a bit of a rare breed to find this type of people that would accept a job in a tech transfer office to do that great valuation work, while maybe they could be offered a very nice position in a startup or in the industry, you see. And so probably there is some reflection to be done about the profile you want to attract, and how to value those profiles, either financially or in any other way, to make sure that you've got this kind of expertise that will really help value what we have in research centers, and bringing different worlds together to make sure that this innovation is not left on the shelf or just damaged by people that are not doing things rightly, clearly. But I can tell you it's improving, because it's very much in the open. And again, people talk a lot and try to figure out what the best process, ideas, way of doing things are. So we're getting there. But then there is maybe a bit of a different, again, talking about mindset, it's about entrepreneurship and the business sense. I mean, it sounds a bit open doors, but it is what it is. It's true that US mentality is always very much business oriented, okay? And sometimes more than often, in Europe, you have different considerations. So you don't have the same stamina, the same acumen, the same move to get things done. But we're getting there. Yeah,
I mean, we are competing anyways on global scale, so we need to get there. There's no.
And you've got collaborations as well between European institutions and US, or even Chinese institutions. So now there are things that are really moving in the right direction. But obviously, there are economics at stake, financials at stake. So it's all a matter of making sure that people get a share of the pie in such collaboration, and then it will be fine.
Yeah, I need to get a share of the pie to found also other companies. I think this is more common in the United States than in Europe, to participate also the people in the organizations. To me, when I look back 5-6 years, it was always clear that human resources need development, and the organizations that help with developing young entrepreneurs, young in the sense of first-time startups or first-time starting a company, are venture capitalists. And when I look back to 2015, it was the first time that I realized that compared to the United States, there is very few venture capital here in Europe. How do you see the situation of venture capital currently in Europe after the pandemic or during the pandemic?
Alors, the comparison between the States and Europe remains the same. At the end of the day, you've got more funds, more money, and more investment done in the US compared to Europe. I mean, in my sector, it's very obvious. I mean, if we take different database and source of information, so maybe the figures slightly differ, but the ratio is about the same. For last year, it was slightly less than $9 billion of VC investment in life sciences in Europe. And in the US, it was, I think, $36 billion. So you see an order of magnitude more in the US. And it means what? It means obviously more projects financed, more startups financed. And so if one thinks just by statistics, eventually you will have more success stories out of the US than for Europe, just based on a numbers game, okay? Then one might say, hey, yes, but, and it's true, everything costs more in the US. It's true. Very true. It can cost 2, if not 3 times more in terms of equipment, salaries, lawyers. I mean, you name it when you are in the US. So it requires more investment behind. But guess what? Just the US is a bigger market somehow for drugs and devices, and in a way easier to access because it's one country with one language and one approval process and things like that, compared to Europe, where you can have dissimilarities and things to go through. So this gap exists. It exists for ages, since the beginning, and I think it will continue to exist. There is another gap, which is as well at the end of the food chain, I would call it, which is IPO, but as well somehow M&A. Maybe we'll touch upon this later on, but it's true that it's a more sane IPO environment in the US, more capable of attracting startups and give them more financial means for their ambitions compared to what we have in Europe. So this is as well something where we need to work on. It's not new. People are trying to improve things, but maybe we'll get back on this.
Yeah, for me it was new a couple of years ago, so maybe it's an old well-known problem. I hear it very often currently since I start talking with people.
If I may, Christian, I just want to say that on the entrepreneurship, I mean, first you need an industry in Europe, okay, a pharma and device industry, out of which innovation can come from, actually, but as well people with experience that will be the founders or co-founders of startups focused on a given technology, program, device that will bring that to the next step with more attention and focus than the big guys would ever have put onto it, okay? So we need to keep the big guys in Europe, okay? Because this is as well a pool of experienced people. And then in terms of entrepreneur and startups, I mean, we have had now a few generation of those. And interestingly enough, as much as some biotech and device companies became bigger and became themselves the next acquirers, okay, after starting nimble and growing, you've got from this first generation of entrepreneurs, people having worked closely to those guys with successes, but as well with failures, because you learn from failures. And this is something that we really need to keep in mind in Europe. Failures is not the end of it. As long as you understand why and you don't repeat it, it's great in terms of experience to get to the next step with another opportunity. And so you see a lot of those people coming from, I would say, all names in European biotech, successful ones usually, that are now CEO of companies, sometimes 2 or 3 times CEO of companies. So you see, we have entered, I think, into this virtuous cycle in Europe, which US experienced a long time ago. But again, the US, I think, has been largely pulled up with a very attractive and welcoming capital market, which has been lacking for too long in Europe. And this is something we really need to tackle.
I completely agree to what you say. Failure is the way to mastery. I started playing golf last year and I just can say, man, I suck. So it's just such a difficult sport. But my teacher said, the pro said, you need every swing that fails to understand how that game works. And you need to train. And I think entrepreneurship is pretty much the same. You not only need the success stories, you also need the stories about failure. When I look at the Austrian or the Viennese community and life science society, how this evolved since 2006, every company that failed was the breeding ground for 3 new companies. So people just move on, try the next thing, as long as they are allowed to legally and not pushed down or in a very restrained by legal restrictions. So I think what you say, that we must understand that even when a company fails is a good thing for society, that people learn something and can move on and try the next best thing, is very important, that the community evolves. What
Yeah.
I didn't understand in the last 15 years was the listings that happened in the life science industry. When I think about BioNTech raised money in Europe, got, I think, one family office in that supported the company up to the stage where they could start thinking about commercializing it. And then they made a decision to get listed on the Nasdaq. I saw the same here in Austria with Nabriba, for example. Nabriba got a good start, got 40 million venture capital in 2006, upped it a couple of times, even during the crisis from 2008 onwards, and then decided to get listed on the Nasdaq. HOOKIPA Pharma, also a company here in Austria, same decision. Why is that?
So this is where we're going to talk a bit about the stock market. I mean, what exists in the US and still is missing largely in Europe is one stock market. Okay, in the US, you've got NASDAQ. And so the investors will go on NASDAQ to be able to, I would call it bet, but an educated bet most of the time, and I'll come back on that again, on those companies that are raising funds through an IPO, because an IPO is not an exit, it's raising funds, okay, to provide more fuel, more cash to the programs and the technology. And so you've got very savvy, specialized investors in this US market that can understand what a company is doing, and they understand as well, they can anticipate the timing, how long it will take to deliver the next inflection points and the next key data set. And if you are faced with generalist investors, not specialized investors that are not really understanding what you're doing, well, first of all, it might be difficult to attract them as investors in an IPO unless they want to get a bit of a hype because they have a kind of pocket allocated to anything else than the classic industries. Okay, fair enough. But as soon as there are maybe gray or bad news, they will fly away. Okay, so this is a bit of an issue. This is why you need savvy, specialized investors, and sometimes even before IPO to fully support the IPO. The nickname for those is our crossover, meaning investor that will come before IPO and with the mentality that the philosophy that they will invest at IPO time as well to make sure the IPO comes through and that the company can move to the next steps. We still lack this in Europe, and in Europe you've got different markets. Okay, you've got London Stock Exchange, you've got alternative investment market, you've got Euronext Paris, Euronext Amsterdam, Euronext Brussels, you name it. Okay, and so this is a bit of an issue in Europe to make sure you can attract not only savvy investors, specialized investors, which are few and far between in Europe, but as well that you attract enough of them in one same market where they can all really put some money. So there is this issue, which is a structural issue that we need to address on the stock market in Europe. And so you have, faced to that, either you've got businesses which are innovative business, which might need less money and who are okay to maybe raise less at a lesser valuation somehow on a European stock exchange. But if you need to raise big money at IPO and with follow-ups, and when you want to reach generous enough valuations and as well liquidity, meaning trading of shares, well, guess what? I mean, the facts, the data is there. You're better off going on NASDAQ than on Europe. Okay, but for European company, you need, I think, to anticipate the fact that you need to be over the crowd, and you will have US companies wanting to list as well on the US NASDAQ. And guess what? They've got US investors. Their name is already known to the IPO investors. So the dynamic is easier for those US companies. And this is where I strongly believe that venture capital in Europe can take the best of the two worlds. And this is what at Seroba we've been doing, and we will still push in doing, which is, okay, we've got great science, we've got breeds of entrepreneurs that are really up to it now in Europe, but at some point, let's get more visible in the US and let's access the pool of talents and money available in the US. But it's all about the timing. You need to avoid being dogmatic and make sure that when it is really needed, you get there. And else you might have a two-step process where one might start listing in Europe, but then list into NASDAQ as well, just to become more aware of what is a public company, a board and the governance which needs to change as well. And once they are comfortable, they say, okay, now we can go to NASDAQ because we're fully ready, you see. But again, this is a major distinct difference between US and Europe. And as I said, I strongly believe that the US market has been pulled up in a favorable way with a very nice and generous IPO market, which we have been lacking in Europe. And this is really something we need to tackle, because it's not only about allocating resources in company creation and the early stage financing. If we want to keep those champions in Europe, it is late stage financing, which includes as well a good IPO market.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, coming from the corporate side, what should you do as an entrepreneur when you don't find sufficient investment capital in later stages? You're in Europe, you have to go somewhere.
Yes.
You can't stop the company.
And
say,
this
okay.
is why a lot of countries, I'm talking about my country, France, but others as well, have made a big push into later stage / growth capital funds to avoid seeing those companies going too early, either to foreign investors, but worse, being acquired too early by foreign companies. And so this is one way, but again, it is not the recipe, and you need to address a few other things as well.
Now, I think the dynamics in the United States interesting. For example, Cathie Wood's ARK funds that are also investing heavily in listed companies, even when they don't have would call it a validated business model already. So companies that are clearly have negative operative cash flows. So they just look, she's just with her team, she just looks at how innovative the companies are and if they can disrupt an industry and just picks them up. And something like that, for example, in my opinion, is missing in Europe. So these follow-on investors who also take up risks after the IPO.
Probably, but I would prefer having specialized investors, not people playing the statistic, because again, you need stability on the investor basis. You need people, investors, to understand what it will take and be there when there needs to be a follow-on investment after the IPO, you see. Yeah. So, okay, that's interesting, but it wouldn't be my favorite approach, I would say.
That's true. Let's talk a little bit. Let's stay in Europe for a while and talk about the situation, how to invest in early stage companies. I mean, I read also on the internet figures from the United States. I don't have it for Europe. Articles say that $70 trillion are handed down from the boomer generation to millennials. So basically they inherit the money because the old generation just passes away. Yeah. And let's just assume that someone gets 100 billion on their bank account and can do something with that money. Wouldn't it be logical to start directly investing in startup companies? I mean, we all heard the hero stories, the 100,000x something return on investment when you just pick the right number. Yeah. What is the rationale for those people to not directly go into the early stage environment, but to invest in a venture fund?
So, I mean, everyone is free, and I'm a liberal at heart, so they can do whatever they want with the money they have, either inherited or earned. That's not too much of my business. But if I had a piece of advice, it would be to think hard about if they understand the drivers of a market, the unique selling points of a technology or program, what it takes in terms of skills, competencies, and the various complex regulatory steps to go through before investing directly. Because when you don't know, well, an industry as complex and regulated as life sciences, you are prone to surprises, and sometimes not the best surprises, okay? So it's not only a matter of being able or not to understand the data, the science, the biology. I mean, that with time and good mentors, you can get there, but it's really to have a good appreciation of the quality of a business, of what is being developed in terms of research and development, and as, if not even more importantly, the quality of the team you're going to bet on. Because unless it's kind of friends and families that are creating a startups and okay, it sounds fantastic, you're going to save the world, and guess what, it's my cousin or an old-time friend, I'll put some money onto him. Okay, fair enough. But if you don't know the guys, that's tricky, because at the end of the day, as I said before during that podcast, the human factor is essential. So this is where there is an arbitrage to be made between investing directly into one company among hundreds of others, sometimes dozens in the same area, trying to second guess if this is really innovative, really cutting edge, if they're going to make it, not understanding competition and positioning, for example. So there's an arbitrage between this and investing into a venture capital fund. Okay, and actually there are a lot of high net worth and family office that can do both depending on the sector and the maturity of the company. But talking to now some, if not many of them, they understand how complex R&D is, how risky it is, and to optimize the chances of success and diversify the risk as well, they might be better off investing into one or more actually venture capital funds, with different investment thesis, even in one same sector, like life sciences, which is pretty broad actually, and learning from that with the team of the venture capital fund. But it's not to say that they cannot as well, maybe from time to time, co-invest alongside the fund into those invested companies. It can happen. Okay, they can be welcomed. So this arbitrage is something that is really needed in terms of hard thinking to make sure that the money you have, in a way, is not going to be wasted on an opportunity which is not really one, and on people which are not really, I would say, either experienced or worst, not trustful.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into the magic of venture capital. What is the secret sauce of a venture capital fund that they could offer to family offices and business angel?
I think that there can be various secret sauces. I mean, the one, my recipe has got many ingredients, okay? But I think one needs to look at the venture team and look at the experience of the people. And it's not only the years of experience, it's as well what they went through, what stories they went through in terms of investment, at which cycle of investment, the scouting for interesting opportunities, the negotiation of term sheets and an investment, the follow-ups up to the exit, and this several times. And as well the failures, and listen to what they have to say about the failures. Are they open and humble enough to acknowledge the fact that, yes, okay, the investment thesis originally might have changed, or they might have been wrong, and how they learn from that. This is very important. And this is experience. And experience is as well about the network, the people you met over time, how you were able to learn from each other, and with whom you want to do business. I mean, after 20 years of experience in VC, I can tell you the people that are like-minded, that I like and they like to work with me as well. And so it's not only the funds, it's the people inside the funds. And it's very important because there's, again, this alchemy needed at the governance level, at the board level, with the managers, okay? So the human factor is super important. And you need to see as well, it's part of the ingredients in the secret sauce, you need to have a complementarity in the team, in their members. It cannot be just a collection of individuals, okay? It needs to be people coming from different backgrounds, with different experience, different networks. Because if you've got McKinsey people very, very well in terms of intelligence, all dressed the same, having gone through the best case studies and the best universities and schools in the US and Europe, well, if they tend at the end of the day to think the same, it might not lead you necessarily to the best direction, and sometimes it will lead you into a wall. And if you have clones and they face failure, they might not be able to understand why and just be able to do better deals afterwards. And complementarity is very key. But again, you have to get over a mere collection of individuals. It needs to be a real partnership. People that are not there to take the money for themselves, for their own investments, and to take the light, okay? It's people that needs to understand that it's collective and that you bring to the table for your colleagues in a VC firm, but as well for all the portfolio, all the investment made, your experience and your network, okay? And it's, I mean, having gone through that in various funds and knowing other funds, I can tell you that Soroba is one of a rare breed where we have this mentality. It is Seroba first, it is partnership first, it is companies first. And I'm helping the portfolio companies of my colleagues by putting them in touch with relevant people and by sometimes helping with my own experience and my own suggestions as much as they do for me. Because at the end of the day, it's collective success. This is what we want to aim to. And this is easier said than done. You need to have the right mentality and you need to have the right economics as well. So yeah, this is where you need to find the right fit. It's like a wedding in a way, you know. Not only you need to fall in love somehow at the beginning and to be aligned and being able to live together, but you need to go along the journey together as well, with various turns and bumpy roads from time to time. Very important. Very important.
That's true.
And so then it's access to a quality deal flow. But again, this is a network, the experience, okay, and people being able to understand what's key in a given indication and an area to spot the right startups, the right approach, and as well somehow educate the colleagues about why this is a great opportunity. You know, not imposing anything, but explaining and bringing the experts as well to second what the initial thoughts are. So it's human nature, you see, once again.
I completely agree. I mean, the team is important. And I think with Soroba, you have 20 years, or is it first when was Soroba founded?
Yeah, Soroba was the first ever life sciences dedicated VC fund in Ireland. And the first fund one was early 2002. So yes, it's 20 years now.
And Soroba went through 3 funds. So there's
four.
Okay. So there's a long track record, and it's also, I think, a well-known brand in Europe. Meanwhile, and globally, probably also.
Yes, it's resonating more and more. I must say, I think it comes both from. I mean, it's not to put laurel on my head, but somehow the quality of the people and the fact that we are very approachable. Okay, and very easy to work with. But it's as well the fact that, yes, we're becoming more visible with companies where we have syndicated with other well-known VCs. And so we're part of that game, you know, where now Soroba resonates in the mind of many entrepreneurs, of many other VC funds, and even into the ears of many LPs, i.e. the investors into funds, clearly. And we went through a phase where we were more tagged as Irish medical device. And now people understand that actually it's been years and years and years that we are not only biotech and medtech, and actually more biotech than medtech today, European, but as well with an American footprint, because we always invested in the US and Canada on top of Europe as well.
You mentioned you like talking about failure stories. There's always this debate, are we success buyers? Should we talk more about failure? I love the success stories. So can you share one success story from your VC life?
So yeah, there are a few, because when you think about it, just at Seroba, when you look, I think we have 27, if not 28 investments now. And we brought, well, when I say we, so do you see this is a VC trend? I say we say we, but we should always say the companies that we invested in and the teams of those companies brought to the market eventually 10 devices and I think 2 drugs on market, which is quite nice as a reward as well. And so if I focus on your Soroba, I mean, I could talk for ages about example, but I would think about a company that we have been actually supporting already at the spin-out stage from a company. I think it was a conglomerate named IMI. This company name is Quanta. And Quanta is the next gen dialysis machine delivering high quality dialysis at the clinic and at home. And the end goal is really making sure that those patients under dialysis can have a better life and actually even a better treatment at home than what they have today through clinics or specialized centers. So we help them spin out. We co-led years ago a Series A, which was 10 million pounds back then. Okay, and Seroba worked hard alongside the other investors and the managers to get the right vision and transformative potential for this company, up to the point where, guess what, coming from a 10 million pound Series A years ago, end of last year, they raised a Series D of $225 million, being now at commercial stage and being focused on the US market on top of the first European countries they were focused on. So that's a brilliant company, and I've known actually the actual CEO for some time, even before Soroba, and they've done a superb job, and it has not been easy. Far from that, I can tell you. So now they are hopefully on the road to success with the means of the ambitions and becoming the next leader in the field. So we're quite proud of having been part of that journey. I mean, other stories. So this was more medtech. If we talk more about biotech, there was, because it was acquired, Covagen. So Covagen, we co-led a Series A extension. I think it was back in 2010, and Covagen was about the potential of B-specific, even tri-specific antibodies. So a given treatment modality in the biologics area, without getting too much into the details for the audience that is not necessarily versed into this type of technicalities. But basically, it was really a big potential to go after better treatment for complex and chronic diseases. And so we, at Seroba, we provided a lot of input into the indication and help in strengthening the board, the management team, bringing the right advisors. And then we were a member of an M&A steering committee, because at the board level, you've got very often subcommittees, transaction committees, remuneration committees. So Seroba was part of the M&A committee, and it was a competitive M&A process and bidding. And eventually, Janssen acquired the company in 2014. And we made a very nice return on that in terms of multiple invested capital and IRR. And so it was a very nice story for Seroba as well. And lately, you've got, I was thinking about a company that has a great potential. And I think that the valuation will probably see hopefully an uptick later this year with more clinical data. It's a company named Fusion, which is in Canada, talking about our exposure to the North American market, and a Canadian company which actually listed on NASDAQ in June 2020. Okay, they raised more than $200 million as an IPO, and we were there at Series A and participated as well in the Series B. And this is a company into the radiopharmaceuticals, targeted radiopharmaceuticals for oncology. There have been big acquisition in terms of billions being put on the table to acquire other companies before in the space. And so this is a company that not only we helped, but that has a great potential. And I think it will bring very relevant drugs eventually to the patients. We're very hopeful on that.
That sounds great. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Bruno, we had the political point of view, the corporate point of view. We also had the point of view of people investing in VCs. Let's take a little bit the entrepreneurship point of view. How do VCs operate? When when I simplify it, I mean, it sounds to me like I create a company, I find a team, just pick my buddies from the bar next door and put them in a pitch deck. Then I send it over to a venture capitalist and he wires $20 million right after reviewing the pitch deck. How is the reality? What kind of deals are VCs looking for?
Alors, funny enough, in the tech world, not in life sciences yet, I've seen very, very early stage funds that were ready in 3 weeks to give a bit of seed money.
Really?
Not 20 million, but yes, a few 100,000 with a very standard term sheet. Okay. So this kind of VC business model exists, but it's really playing the statistics. Well, I'm not into the tech area to be able to judge if this is sound or not. I found it surprising. I mean, in my life sciences area, where again, as far as Soroba is concerned, it's new drugs and new devices, it is such complex that I don't see how we could bet so easily on anyone coming in our doors and within weeks providing a term sheet and let's go, unless really we monitored the guys from before, from wherever they are. We monitored the area they are entering into, and we very quickly understand how great the technology and the approach is. And this is something not to miss. Honestly, very rare, because there's always the need for us, because as well, we are juggling with so many opportunities in any given day, on top of the portfolio, on top of relationship to investors, etc. That it takes sometimes for us to be fully comfortable and understanding what the business is about, what the investments are, and having more interaction with the team to make sure that as well we've got an aligned vision with them and that there could be a match. Okay. And actually, just on the as a side note, those last 2 years being very virtual proved to me that okay, we could still do deals virtually without meeting necessarily the people face to face, but usually there was an element of trust and confidence in people you had known before. Okay, not only through a video screen, and it makes an entire difference, because honestly, you're going to focus more your attention on those compared to people you didn't know from before and you couldn't meet. Okay, so this human factor is important, at least to me. Maybe I'm now an old part of the old generation, I don't know, but I need, and I'm always asking the managers and the founders, make sure that everything is reciprocal. It's not only me being there and looking at your data, your CV, your background, talking about people, about what you do and yourself, but make sure you do the same about me, about my fund, and about any co-investors that will come, because it's going to be a journey which might be tough again, and a kind of short-term, mid-term wedding. So we better know a bit each other before we get into bed. Okay.
No, I completely agree. Sorry for interrupting you. I just finished the book written by Jordan Belfort, The Wolf of Wall Street, The Way of the Wolf. And it's about selling. And he pretty much says the same thing you do. It's a different game. But he also says people tend to jump too quickly on the selling side of a deal. They want to push people through to closing and forgetting about, he calls it information gathering phase. And you said alignment of visions. So I think this is key to success, to really get to know the people first, understand what they have to offer, what they need, and what VCs, for example, are looking for, and also on the other hand, what the companies have to offer before pushing forward to closing. Do you see it similar?
No, totally. And what we all want to avoid is the oh shit moment with the first board meeting, where we look at each other and we say, oh God, okay, that we didn't hear before. That's new. Interesting. But it's too late.
That's true. That's true.
And similarly, maybe the managers will say from the behaviors of those new investors, oh my God, this is not what I expected. And they need, and again, it's all about communication before the deal, to make sure that everyone understand each other, have the same expectations, and then it's easier. It's an easier flow of communication, and you can deal with concerns, issues, questions much more easily. It's so much better. Okay,
yeah, true.
Rather than being too shy or too uncomfortable raising a point, either the manager being not comfortable because okay, there are some hiccups. How am I going to announce that to my board and to my investors representing the funds on the board? And this is not the way a board should be governed. I mean, the board is there first and foremost to help, to support and to help. Of course, if there is major dissent and very diverging views, then we have maybe some tough decisions to make. But it's really, I always view that as a partnership. Okay, and the same way at Soroba, we think collectively when we make an investment. It's not Alan, Daniel, Jennifer, or myself making an investment. It is the partnership and the investment committee deciding to decline or to agree to an investment. Okay, so it's a collective responsibility, and this is the same mentality we need to have at the board level as well. Okay, so it's tough, but you need to avoid the prima donnas, the big egos. I mean, you need to have people which are open-minded and open-minded. Okay, so coming back to those entrepreneurs, I mean, taking a few folks at the bar, buddies, and writing a quick BP and asking for 20 million. Of course, this is not how it's being done. But one thing for sure, and this is a piece of advice, if I may, is to make sure that you are ready before pitching to a VC. So either you've got already contacts in the VC world, which are kind of close contacts, sometimes even friends, and there you can be more open and say, okay, I'm wondering if I should say this or this, how to present this. Is it the best story flow? Is it the key messages that are getting to the audience or not? Well, fair enough, and you can receive some help. But don't go out there without being ready with VCs you don't know, because we are flooded by opportunities, okay, by the day. And unfortunately, it's tough to hear, but somehow our job is to make sure that we can say quickly no, to be able to focus our resources on the right deals for our fund and our investors, okay? And it is as well needed because you don't want to face investors that don't come back to you or don't necessarily provide any relevant feedback, that you have to contact every 3 or 6 months to know exactly what's going on. So you need to have your pitch ready, and the attention span is usually limited. What I'm saying out of experience is that if in the 21st minutes, sometimes even less slow, so even less so, you do not hook the attention, you do not grab the attention of the audience, then it's going to be a tough sell. If you manage to grab the attention with the key messages and the key data to make us understand how great the business proposal and the investment thesis is, then you won big time. Okay, and you need to make our life easy. Okay, don't go into very detailed, elaborated technicalities. I mean, okay, we'll see that at the next step when we will go under NDA and we'll look into data, reports. That's fine enough. Give us the big picture and the key USPs as to why you are the best in your field, or you will become the best in your field. Okay, this needs preparation. This needs rehearsal. So don't come improvising and thinking, oh, at the end of the day, I know my stuff, and they'll be convinced. Get prepared.
Great words. You mentioned that the attention span is very short. I read in an article that it's 2 minutes, 30 seconds that people have when they are pitching. When they don't hook the VC after 2 minutes, 30 seconds, the opportunity is gone.
Okay, so that may be VCs that have got their iPhone on and looking at the iPhone while the company is presenting, which I resent personally. So this is where the attention span is probably even more limited.
Yeah, maybe with social media these days in the tech world. Let me ask you one question, Bruno. You mentioned that on one hand, it's important to understand the VC and the alignment of visions, and on the other hand, be prepared for pitching. And from my experience, I very often see that companies like to skip this preparation phase and directly jump with a not ready pitch deck into the first pitching. How should organizations or companies tackle this problem? On one hand, getting to know the VC before pitching, and on the other hand, pitching only when they are ready to a VC. How do you see this information gathering phase in the VC?
In an ideal world, they should try and socialize as much as they can by attending conferences and making sure they can meet some of the VCs, either directly, either through an N+1, a common relationship, so that they can get access to those VCs and be able to discuss informally to get the first few feedbacks. Okay, and I think this is probably ideal, especially for first-time teams in a startup that never raised VC money before and who are really asking themselves, well, who are those guys? How can I approach them? I mean, we are approachable. I mean, every VC has got a website. You can access us easily. But best is to try and socialize before through a more informal setting, and conferences are great for that. Actually, we always have parties thrown after the conference here and there, so get ready for your liver to suffer a bit with many drinks, but it's it brings a different flavor, and I think it helps a lot. But obviously, it's like anywhere in this world, in any sector, you will face people that are just very closed, not very nice, no funny, and I don't want to share views, assuming they have any. But so those ones, you get rid of them, and at least by default, you know that you won't work with them, okay, and focus on the rest. It's actually a good piece of due diligence, probably early on.
So it's not harmful to talk to VCs outside the pitching setting. So it's
no,
okay.
No, not at all, and surely not to me. And very often, okay, I need to have an investment opportunity that is appealing to me, okay, and I need to sense that, okay, the guys can be trusted, and I like the attitude. But very often during the entire year, I'm helping startups, founders, CEOs in providing my opinion, and just making sure they understand it's one opinion among many others. Okay, I'm not mad to think I've got the truth and I know everything. Far from that, but at least I'm monitoring, I'm pursuing a conversation, and I think they probably enjoy it because they receive the feedback, they sleep on it, and sometimes they just think, okay, well, yeah, it's one feedback, but it's not what we want to hear, or it's not relevant. Fair enough. I mean, I'm not there to decide or to make sure I have the right thing to say necessarily, but yeah, that's it's visible. It's visible. And so you see, it's all about building trust, confidence, creating a real relationship, and it makes things much more easy when it is prime time for financing. Because when they come to me, I mean, 80% of the job will have been done.
No, that's true. So getting to know people first, but when you flip the switch and say, now I'm pitching because I'm fundraising, then companies should be prepared.
Yes.
And there is another thing that I wanted to hear your opinion on. So it was years ago when I thought I had a great opportunity. And it's like finding friends from a bar, putting them with the pitch deck, and then doing the mathematics behind it and say, okay, anybody who invests $1 million in this company or 5 million can get back after 5 years 10 million. So let's say 2x. Okay. So 2x. I tried to talk to a VC, and she smiled and said, "I come back when you have a 10x opportunity. 2x is not enough for us." And lately, I read an article. I read an article on the internet where a family office stated that meanwhile it's a 100x opportunity that VCs are looking for. Why are these metrics so important in the VC world?
So, okay, so 2x, 10x, 100x. I mean, I will let those people maybe react and tell us where they're coming from. At the end of the day, what is true is that when you consider any VC portfolio, you will have inevitably failures. Okay, that's inevitable. And even in the case of successful companies operationally delivering, sometimes the paycheck at the end, at IPO time, post-IPO, or at M&A is not as high as would have been expected by the investors or by the managers and the co-founders. Well, so be it. So it means that overall, when you want to return with your fund, let's say 3x to your investors in the fund, well, you need to make sure that it is probability weighted somehow. So I understand the comment, which is bring me a 10x opportunity as an investment thesis, and then we'll talk. But I mean, realistically, I'd rather have a portfolio well balanced with lots of 2, 3, 4x, because we will have done a good job on the investment thesis before the investment, and we'll have built the company together for risk mitigation and being able to address any issues later on during the life of the investment, rather than relying on a 10x or 20x investment in my 10, 12, 15 portfolio companies while the rest is failing. You see, it's a dangerous game. The number of game is always a dangerous game. And so it's all to me about maximizing, the potential of success of an investment. And of course, I mean, it needs to be 2, 3, 4x down the road to make sure that I'm bringing enough money to my investors and that my investors are okay. But I'm not going to ask for 10x in a pitch, because honestly, it's a bit ludicrous. Okay. Now, the difference will be if you consider maybe the tech and life sciences. I mean, the tech world for sure, because somehow you have got business models which are less capital intensive. You can actually reach global scale and have amazing valuations where, okay, the early investors will probably make 30, 40, 50, maybe 100, I don't know, X, but it's different business models, okay? And even in the tech world, we always talk about the successes, okay, and the massive returns, but we forget about, unfortunately, all the dead bodies lying around. So I would put a big grain of salt into this kind of feedback. But I can see where they're coming from. But the entrepreneur shouldn't be shocked or afraid or shy, saying, "Oh shit! I mean, there's no way we're going to provide 10x. What are we going to say?" No, don't. At least with me, don't worry. I mean, I will know the hypothesis. I will make my own, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I think many of the stories on podcasts that they hear from business angel-like investors who invested in Facebook. I think Gary Vaynerchuk is one of those who made good money with Facebook Uber investments, and maybe life science ticks a little bit differently. I like fairy tales, and the great thing with fairy tales is that it's nice storytelling. Yeah. And it's very engaging. You have the ups and downs and characters who evolve and need to go to fairs together. And at the end of the day, mostly a prince and a princess marry, and then the end of the story is, and they lived happily ever after. And nobody ever told how this happily ever after looked like. Can you shine a little bit of light how the happily ever after looks like with a VC once the deal is closed? Is it that way that the VC just walks away and says, okay, I deployed my money and that's it for me, and I don't have any more questions?
No, actually, you might think as well in terms of the storytelling, who will kiss the frog to become a prince, okay? Is it the VC having to kiss founders and managers, or the managers having to kiss the VCs, which might be frogs or toads, okay? But this is maybe for another day. No, of course, it's just, I mean, signing the legal documentation for first fundraising is only the beginning of the story, okay? Mm-hmm. Now we're talking real. Now we're talking about execution, and we're talking about how good of a match we will be together at the governance level to make sure we can help and build together this great opportunity. And this is where expectations will be met or fail, clearly. So it's the beginning of a journey. But again, if things have been done hastily, without the right question asked, without the right analysis done, well, you are bound to have surprises, and probably nasty surprises. If everyone has done a proper work at knowing each other, at understanding the business, at aligning visions, it will go better. It's not to say that there will not be tough times, because again, inevitably, this is the life of the startups, okay? It's very rare that a plan is being executed as expected, okay, without hiccups, without competition emerging, without data which are not the one we expected, without people leaving the company to go to whoever and having to be replaced. I mean, yes, all of this happens. But it's again, it's all about anticipation, and it's the time spent before the signing of the legals for fundraising that probably will direct the track into which you will embark for this journey. Very important. And sometimes you see things coming from far away. You want people, but you say, you know what, there's no ideal deals. So let's get to work on it. Let's sign this fundraising and we'll figure out. And there's a bit of that as well, you know. You don't know exactly how it will fare. And for me, this is the excitement as well. I mean, if everything was a stepwise process already cooked and digested ahead, I think I would be so bored I would have done something else of my life. I mean, I like the fact that we have to renew our thinking. We have to be always open-minded to look at what's going on in the field, in the areas, sometimes in very different areas, to be able to feed into the technologies and the programs, to hear very interesting people that we want to add at the governance into the management. I mean, it's great actually, but you have to adapt. You have to adapt, and you have to have a strong heart and strong guts as well. Not to say anything about any other part of our anatomy.
Yeah, that's true. So after the investment is done, there will be further interactions with the venture capitalists. What help can venture capitalists provide during the tough times of the company? Like you said, people are leaving, and or follow-on rounds must be signed, or fundraising must happen, IPOs. What's the role of VCs in all these problematic areas that happen in the daily life of a company?
The rule I'm trying to impose myself, well, there are a few rules, but it's come from experience, not dogma. First, I'm not the manager. There's a red line not to cross, okay? I'm an investor, so I have two hats, shareholder and usually board member, being properly director or observer. So this needs to be taken into account because I'm there to help and support. I'm not there to decide and do in lieu of the management. Very important. The second aspect is not to raise anxiety levels unnecessarily. Okay, you can, I would say, I would call it poke people and raise their heads saying, well, guys, be careful because at that speed you have a wall in front of you, so you better watch out. But there is enough reasons to, I mean, be troubled or face concerns that you don't need to raise anxiety levels unnecessarily. Okay, this is a second rule that I'm always trying to impose myself. And so here it's where communication happens. And the best thing is when you can anticipate issues and you have already solutions when the issues pop up. Okay, and then it's a matter of deciding which alternative, which solutions you want to go after. But it's as well being there as a sparring partner, being elaborated enough to listen to the concerns, to the issues, listen to the management, and bring your good advice. And good advice is not, oh, I've got a great genius idea that no one has heard of, and please do it because I'm a genius. No, not at all. I will always explain the context and where this advice is coming from, what I've seen and experienced before. And very often it is the case that, oh, I'm thinking about an expert in such field that will be probably helpful in having a second opinion from, so that you better know exactly what we need to do, you see. So there needs to be this kind of dialogue, and often, and this is why as well VC is best when it is more local, because you can talk easily and meet people more easily. You know, you've got a call from a CEO, or you calling the CEO because you've got an idea or concern or question or something that came through to you, and we think, shit, I need to talk to my CEO about that. The next morning you can have breakfast with it. Okay. And it's a good informal setting to put things on the table, to discuss and to share views. So this is where we can be very helpful, is bringing the experience, bringing the network, and being there not to judge and raise level of anxiety or impose anything, but really as a support and to help. But easier said than done, because this is where you need to have like-minded people and being able to work together on that. Sometimes the agendas differ and it's human nature, but this is a different story.
That's true. That's true. Human nature plays always an important role in business, and it's very often underrated. I have another question, Bruno, about a topic that I heard in the life science industry the first time when I was on the university. Investment was more taught coming from the Warren Buffett approach. When we deploy capital in a company, it stays there forever, and our preferred investing period is forever. And in the VC world, at Napriva, where the first time I met VCs, I heard the term exit, so that VCs need to exit the story. Yeah. Why is that so important in the VC world? Why can't VCs act like Warren Buffett? Just to deploy money,
I would
and
say
that's
that some VCs will be more patient, okay, because they have an evergreen, open-ended fund. And maybe they have the people with the kind of mindset that matches this kind of more long-term patient views. But it's true that a classic VC, I mean, will be on the road every 3, 4, 5 years to raise a new fund. And when you raise a new fund, guess what? You have to talk about your experience, your track record, the other funds. And this is where exits and good exits makes a difference. Okay. And sometimes people that you will meet are more keen simply on the financials. They want to know if you made 10, 15, 20, 30% IRR or even more. Okay, in some cases. Sometimes we'll say, okay, financials are one thing, but actually tell me the stories into which you invest, why they were cutting edge, where did you help in terms of society, patients, how did it work out? And it depends upon who you're talking to. But it's a fact. I mean, you need to show that you did good deals, and the best thing is cash on cash. Where are the exits? And this is why we have, as soon as we receive an opportunity, the exit in mind. Is this something that will be IPO-able in a few years? Is this something that the pharma industry has its attention onto? Okay, so that there will be collaborations and maybe acquisitions. Because if we don't think about exits and if we let it go, well, not only there will be more failures probably by being too lenient and not focused enough, but as well, guess what? We will not be able to raise another fund. We'll be out of business. That's it. And this is where it's important to think about the innovation for entrepreneurs that they have in their hand. Is it really made for VC capital? Is it really made for VC funding? Is this really what they want to go after? And maybe what type of investors they want to bring in, okay? Sometimes they are better off having, but it's hard. And again, we talk about arbitrage. It's not necessarily the best thing for those high net worth and family office, but those person will be maybe more patient, or more than maybe, okay? To the point where, unfortunately, okay, if this is where maybe some startups and managers will say, you know what, poof, it's a billionaire. He's got enough money, he will always back up. So we can think about restarts, reinventing ourselves if we fail, doesn't matter. And we don't have to be acquired or go into IPO, let's continue our life. It's good enough. Well, it's not the same drive, clearly. I'm not sure it's for the best neither, honestly, because again, it's such complex and competitive. You really need to be totally focused and think about what you're doing day and night to deliver and be always at the forefront, because otherwise you will have bad surprises with competition coming ahead or things that are badly executed. So yeah, it's being driven by that, clearly. Some will say it's bad, but it's not neither good or bad. It's a fact. It's a reality. You need to be aware of this. And guess what? It works out. It works out pretty well for all the parties when it's a success. And we do it again and again.
So it's just the rule of the game, part of the game.
It is, clearly. But think about the investors into those funds. If yourself, you were an investor in a fund, I mean, you would like to see some returns out of it and not have to wait 15, 20 years for that, right? Because otherwise you would say, well, why am I doing that? Well, okay, maybe it's for the good of humanity. Maybe I'm helping indirectly new drugs and devices to come to market, to come to patients. But still, these financial aspects, a lot of investors into funds have it in mind.
So the current, I read, I think it was in November last year, that Sequoia set up a new fund with $9 billion that intends to invest longer over several decades, because they think that those disruptive innovations sometimes need not only 3 to 5 years to come to fruition, they need 10, 20 or 30 years. Do you see a trend on the venture capital market that this thinking that Sequoia presented last year is also taking hold in Europe?
Personally, I didn't come across that in Europe. I didn't come across that in our field. Okay, I mean, a 20-year or more type of fund or investment horizon is more for infrastructure, not for R&D type projects in biotech, medtech, or even tech. But what one would need to probably look into this in more details, because I suspect that even if the fund is being kept open longer, they're probably bringing some cash over the years to investors, so that the investors are not sitting and waiting for 15, 20 years or more before seeing the green back. So it's probably a mix of investment where they allow themselves a longer period of time. There is another element, but it's going to be maybe a bit boring for the audience, which has to be taken into account. It's the management fee. I don't know if the investors in a fund will like to see the fund managers taking management fees for so long out of the money they're bringing into a fund. So I think that there's more into that story that needs more details and more insight to really understand how that works. It might be that there's no more management fee after year 10 anyway, okay, and they still work on the portfolio, I would say for free, but in exchange of maybe a higher carried, I don't know, but there must be something in terms of economics to make it work, because it's not philanthropy, right?
That's true, but I just read the press release, and there were not much details about the metrics. Bruno, are there any questions open that you would like me to ask?
We covered, I think, a lot with the topic we have. I don't know if the audience maybe can jump in and ask questions either in writing or live, which I'm more than happy to answer to, even if it has been now what, an hour and a half.
Hour and a half, yes.
Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
Time flies when you have fun.
But it was a good conversation. Actually, I didn't see the time passing clearly. But I think we covered a lot already, honestly. So I am personally more than happy to receive after this podcast any questions. I'm totally open to that. You can reach me through LinkedIn very easily, or via the Seroba website, Seroba Life Sciences website. You go on the team page and you click on my name, and there will be a message sent to me, and we can have a further talk. And if we can have a face-to-face discussion as well, that's my preferred route after those 2 years of painful distanciation and virtual world.
that's can really meet again globally. It is also for me necessary, like you mentioned before, that probably we are from an old generation that loves meeting in person. Bruno, if you agree, I will put your contact data in the description of the podcast.
Sure. With pleasure.
The articles. I would like to thank you very much for your time and for giving great insights into the VC world. And I hope.
Well, many thanks for the invitation. It was a great moment, and I liked it a lot. I hope there will be more of those. Thank you, Christian. And thank you to the audience for those who attended during this podcast. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great evening. Bye.
Bye.